rather, because we had this, say, oh, the Garuda promises this, the Garuda promises that. Well, have you read the Garuda Purana? No. So, unfortunately, I read it. I won't be able to sleep for the next week after reading it. It's quite frightening. And then sannyasis it's just things like the sannyasis get their skull broken in one way with one thing, and the grahastas get their skull broken in another way. Has anyone here read the Guru? No.
We only heard in Fiji when there was a death program.
Yeah, they talked about it.
Yeah, the priests they talk about it.
But it's quite frightening, and it's actually this whole idea of the Shraddha ceremony where you offer kava to everybody. It's not there in the Guru Purana. It's basically these rice balls. It talks about rice balls.
Yes.
Yeah, the different types of rice balls according to the Varna. It's not just one type of, it gets really, really complex. You have to have a PhD to really perform all those different things. It's not just simple like they told you. So we just chant Hare Krishna.
Very well.
Just too much for me. Okay. Make sure it's tuned. Okay. Streaming. It's interesting, people, just like in this Jaiva Dharma we've been reading, sometimes someone will say something like this Yambar, he would say something about, doesn't say this in the Vedas. And then Dvaita Das says, have you read it?
No.
It's the same thing. Yes, if you disobey the sannyasi, you go to hell. I like that injunction. All right. Jaya Radha Madhava Vishnupad Paramahansa Parvakacharya Osuteta Santashi Shimad. His Divine Grace Abhaya Chandana Vatvananda Goswami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. ISKCON Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Anantakoti Vaishnav Vrinda Ki Jai. Namacharya Shilohira Thakur Ki Jai. Prem Se Kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shidwaita Gadadha Srivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. Shri Shri Radhakrishna Gopikavanath Sayam Kunda Radha Kunda Giri Govardhan Ki Jai. Vrindavatam Ki Jai. Mathuram Ki Jai. Jagadasami Ki Jai. Yamunamai Ki Jai. Shmati Lasi Devi Ki Jai. Samaveda Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. Gaur Parimalanda Hari Hari Bol. All glories the assembled devotees. All glories the assembled devotees. All glories the assembled devotees. All glories to Shri Guru and Gauranga Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Gaur Premananda Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Shrimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Namaste Saraswati Devi Gaurvadi Vijali Kansesha Srinivadi Vasyacha Dejatari. So we're going to continue with our study of the Jaiva Dharma. And in this particular section, we have a discussion about Vedic rituals. And actually, we're going to get to funeral ceremonies. Somehow or other, Krishna arranges these interesting things. So, without further ado, Om Gana Timirandasha Karanjana Shalakaya Chakshur Meditam Yena Tasmai Shigurave Namha. I offer my respectful obeisances unto the lotus feet of my spiritual master, who is so kind, and he's opened my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge while I was blinded in the darkness of ignorance. So let's share the screen. Jaiva Dharma. There we go. And the chapter is entitled Nitya, Dharma, and History. So we'll continue from here. Just open up the chat window on the side. Oh, glories to Zoom. It's nice, isn't it?
Yeah.
Krishna has given us all this facility. Krishna created COVID so we would actually all associate with each other continually online. Had he not done that, nobody would know about Zoom, isn't it? You'd all be just compact in your little yatras, not aware that there's a whole world of devotees out there. So, anyway, this discussion between Nyaya Ratna and Vaishnava Das again. So, Pravatir Bhutanan Devatischa Mahapala. Humans have this tendency to kill animals, but renouncing it yields great results. And here's the question. Nyaya Ratna said, why do Vaishnavas object to doing Shraddha rites, etc., for absolving debts to ancestors? I didn't plan this out. I didn't plan it out, believe me. It was Krishna's planning. Vaishnava Das said, because yesterday, there's so many discussions about ghosts and
Shraddha.
Shraddha and putras and all that other nice stuff. So anyway, the Vaishnavas do not object to persons absorbed in karma performing karma kanjiya Shraddha rites. The scriptures say only this. This is a famous verse from the Bhagavatam. Devarshi bhutapta nrinam vitrinam nakinkoronayam rinija rajan sarvatmanam yasharanam sharanyam kato mukundam pariricha kartam. So, O king, one who has given up all varnashram duties and has taken full shelter of the lotus feet of Mukunda, offers shelter to all, is not a debtor or a servant of the devatas, great sages, ordinary living beings, relatives, or pitris. Bhagavatam 11:5-41. Those who have surrendered to the Lord are not servants of the devatas, sages, other beings, relatives, mankind, or ancestors. By surrender to the Lord, they are absolved of their debts. The devotees do not perform karma, kandya, shraddha rites for the absolution of debts. Uh-oh. Instead, they worship the Lord and offer the ancestors that prasad, and then eat that prasad along with their families. Nyaya said, from what time does one attain this state of qualification? Vaishnavadas says, from the day that one has faith in topics of the Lord and His name, the Vaishnava has the qualification. In other words, you don't have to be a pure devotee. Tavat karmani kurvita nanirvidyeta yavata matkata shravanadova shraddha yavana jayate. One should perform one's daily and periodic rites, nitya naimittika karmas, as long as one does not become detached from them and has not awakened his faith in hearing topics about me. Bhagavatam 11:29. Nyayaratna said, I have become very blissful. Wow. I have developed faith in Vaishnava Dharma on hearing your learned and detailed deliberation. I have become happy. Hari, hara. There's no longer any use in debating. They are the most learned scholars. They are skillful in deliberating on scriptures. Whatever we may say to preserve our livelihood, that means they're interested in their income. There's no famous scholar or an excellent Vaishnava like Nimai Pandit, born in Bengal or in all of India. We will now cross the Ganga. The day is ended. Well, he became converted. Pretty good, isn't it? So we should try that with the devotees who are attached to the Garuda Purana, if they become converted. Saying Hari Bol, the group headed by Nyayaratna, in other words, they were chanting the name of the Lord, departed. The Vaishnavas shouting, Jai Sachinandana, began dancing. Victory to the Vaishnavas. Okay, so chapter 11, Nitya Dharma and Idols. On the western bank of the Ganga was the village of Kulia Pahadapura. This famous village was situated within Koladvipa, within Navadvipa. At the time of Mahaprabhu, Madhava Das Chattopadhyaya, also called Chakari Chattopadhyaya, who was well respected, was born here. His son was Vamshi Vadhana Nanda Thakura. By the mercy of Mahaprabhu, Vamshi Vadhananda manifested special powers. Vamshi Vadhananda was famous as the avatar of Krishna's flute. He was famous for receiving the mercy of Vishnu Priya. He actually served Vishnu Priya. He was the servant. After her disappearance, he transferred the deity service from Mayapur to Kulia Bahadapura. When his descendants took shelter of Bhagana Pada on receiving the mercy of Janavi Mata, the deity service remained in Kulia in the hands of priests living in Marancha. Kuli was on the opposite side of the Ganga from Old Navadvip. Many villages of Kulia, such as Chinadonga and others, were quite famous. A devotee merchant of Chinadanga held a spiritual festival in the temple of Pahadapura. He called many Brahmana scholars and all the Vaishnavas situated in the 16 kroshas of Navadvip. On the day of the festival, all the Vaishnavas came from all directions. From Nishingapali came Anantadas, etc. Remember Anantadas Babaji. From Mayapura came Gorachanda Das Babaji. From Bilva Pushkarini came Narayana Das Babaji. From Moda Druma came the famous Narahari Das, etc. From Godruma came Paramahansa Babaji, Vaishnava Das, etc. Vaishnava Das is our real hero who defeats all the rascals. From Samudra Gada came Sachinandana Das, etc. They had tilak on their foreheads, tulsi beads around their necks, and stamps of Gora and Nityananda on all their limbs. So they'd take these stamps and they'd stamp. They all had beads in their hands. Beautiful sight. Many loudly chanted the Mahamantra, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. With karatals, many enthusiastically sang Gauranga dances in the Sankirtan. Some sang Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasati Gaur Bhakta Vrinda while dancing. Many were weeping. Their hairs were standing on end. Some wept and said in pitiful voices, O young Gauranga, when will I see your eternal pastimes in Navadvip? Some were singing with mridanga accompaniment. The inhabitants of Kulia were astonished on seeing the intense bhava, its emotions, of the Vaishnavas. Moving along, the Vaishnavas arrived at the temple hall of Mahaprabhu. The merchant sponsor, with cloth wrapped around his neck, fell at the feet of the Vaishnavas and with politeness showed humility. When the devotees arrived at the temple hall, the priests brought prasad garlands and placed them on the Vaishnavas' necks. The singing of Chaitanya Mangal started. Hearing the sweet pastimes of Chaitanya, the Vaishnavas developed various sattvika bhavas. We talked about that yesterday, the eightfold sattvika bhavas, which are the constitutional nature of the Vaishnavas. And sometimes they're exhibited and sometimes they're not. When they were absorbed in the bliss of prema, one guard came and announced to the temple managers, Shata Saika Parangana's chief Mula has come with the group and is sitting in the outer area. He desires to speak to some learned Vaishnavas. In other words, a Muslim came. And a very intelligent, educated Muslim. The temple managers informed the gathering of learned Babajis. As soon as they heard this, their ecstasy faded, and they became sad, because they were just enjoying amongst the devotees, and all of a sudden, oh my God, we got a philosophical discussion now. Krishnadas Babaji of Madhya Dvipa asked, what is the mullah's intention? The manager learned the intention of the mullah and said, he desires to discuss on some spiritual matters with the learned Vaishnavas. He also said that this mullah was the best scholar. So let me just read the footnote here. The phrase Gora Nagara Gana is used to describe the inhabitants of Kulia. The term Gora Nagara usually refers to followers of Mahaprabhu who saw him as Krishna engaged in pastimes with the gopis. So he's a good scholar among the Muslims and was attached to preaching his Dharma and was not disrespectful to other Dharmas. He was greatly respected in Delhi. He requested that one or two learned Vaishnavas should come forward and discuss scriptures with the mullah so that it would be possible to establish pure Vaishnava Dharma as victorious. Hearing of an opportunity to preach Dharma, Vaishnava Dharma, some Vaishnavas desired to talk with the mullah. After some discussion, it was decided that Gaura Chanda Das Babaji of Mayapur, Vaishnava Das Jai, Vaishnava Das again, of Godhra, Premadas of Janu Nagara, and Kali Pavana Das Babaji of Champahata would speak to the mullah. After completing the singing of Chaitanya Mangal, they would all go there. The four Babajis said, Jaya Nityananda, and went with the temple manager to the area outside. Very interesting discussion we're going to hear. The assembly area was excellent, shaded nicely by a banyan tree. Seeing the Vaishnavas arrive, the mullah's party greeted them with respect. The Vaishnavas, understanding that all jivas are servants of Krishna, offered respects to Vasudeva, situated in the Muslims' hearts, and sat on separate asanas. It was a splendid scene. On one side sat about 50 Muslim scholars with white beards. Behind them, some well-equipped horses were tethered. On the other side, the four splendid Vaishnavas sat humbly behind them. Behind them, many eager Hindus sat. Gaurachanda first said, Gentlemen, why do you remember worthless souls like us? Humility of the Vaishnavas. Mula Madhavrudina. said with respect, "Please accept our greetings. We have come since we would like to ask you a few questions," Gaurachanda said. "What do we know that we can nicely answer your learned questions?" So, taking the lead, Badarulila said, "Gentlemen, in Hindu society, worship of devatas has been current for a long time. We see that the Quran says there is only one God, he is formless. If one commits offense, if one makes a form of God and worships it. Doubtful on this issue, I asked many Brahmin scholars. They say that God is certainly formless, but since one cannot think of a formless entity, one can meditate on and worship God in an imaginary form. I was not happy with this answer, since an imaginary form is made by Satan." Everybody knows who Satan is? It's the Diablo. That's Spanish for devil. And it's called Vyut. Worship of Vyut is strongly forbidden. God is not satisfied with this worship, but rather punishes that worshiper. We have heard that Chaitanya Dev, your founder, has made Hindu Dharma faultless. However, in his system, there's an arrangement for this Vyut worship. That's a real derogatory word. It's material. We wish to know from you Vaishnavas why, after consulting many scriptures, you do not reject the Vyut worship. Hearing this question, the learned devotees laughed internally, but externally said, "Learned Babaji, please answer the question." Gaurachanda said, "As you order. What you call Allah, we call Bhagawan. The Supreme Lord is only one being. He is known by various names in the Quran, Puranas in various places in various languages. The main point is that the name which reveals the Supreme Lord completely should be especially respected. For that reason, we give special respect to the name Bhagawan. Among all the names such as Allah, Brahman, Paramatma, etc., Allah indicates that he who is the greatest. We cannot say that this greatness is the highest state of God. That state which gives most astonishment should be most appreciated or respected. Of course, greatness causes astonishment, but its opposite, being very minuscule, also causes astonishment. In other words, something is insignificant. Thus, the word Allah does not indicate the limit of astonishment. The word Bhagawan consolidates, that means combines together, all types of astonishment in the human mind. Being the most powerful, having the highest degree of greatness, Aishvarya, and being the smallest, are the one characteristic of God, are one. The second quality of God is that he possesses all Shaktis, Virya. What is impossible for the human mind to conceive is dependent on the Achincha Shakti of the Lord. By his Achincha Shakti, that means inconceivable potency, the Lord is simultaneously without form and endowed with form. If you say that God cannot have a form, then you do not accept that the Lord has Achincha Shakti. By this Shakti, the Lord possesses a form full of pastimes for the devotees. Since Allah, Brahman, and Paramatma are formless, they are devoid of special astonishment. So, we were talking about this before, about Krishna having Achincha Shakti. Yesterday we were talking about that, because the question as we were riding in the car was raised by the driver, that how is it that Krishna is interacting with his expansions, and I gave some examples of that, how Krishna is interacting with Balaram and sometimes having a disagreement with Balaram. I gave the story, I recited the story of Subhadra being kidnapped, and of course there's the other story of Bhimsen fighting Duryodhana and hitting him below the belt, and Balaram being very upset, and Krishna having to interfere with Balaram trying to kill Bhimsen. So I explained, the Lord is Achincha, the Lord is inconceivable, because he can do anything, and don't try to understand him. Because he's God, he can do anything in any way he wants. He can interact with himself in unlimited ways, in unlimited circumstances, unlimited pastimes. So that's a Chincha Shakti. Bhagawan is always most auspicious and full of good qualities, Yasha. Thus his pastimes are full of sweetness. Bhagawan is full of beauty, Shri. The jivas see him as a beautiful form with their spiritual eyes. Bhagawan is unlimited knowledge, Jnana. That is to say, he is a Chit Swarupa, spiritual form, pure and complete, an object beyond matter. That Chit Swarupa is his deity form. That deity form is beyond Vyut, or material form. Bhagawan, though he produces everything, is independent and uncontaminated by ragya. These are the 6 qualities of Bhagawan. Is it actually very hot here, or is it my imagination? What?
It
It's
is
quite
on the
warm.
warmer
So,
side.
yeah,
On the
sure.
warmer side.
Thought I had a
Door open,
fever.
perhaps.
What?
Would you like the door open?
Yeah, why don't you open the door, because
Yeah.
it's warm. It was cold in my room, and now it's hot in here.
Because we turn on the heater.
You had the heater on before,
Yeah,
yeah, that's why
that's
it's so hot. Bhagawan has 2 manifestations, lordly and sweet. Thank you. His sweet manifestation is the greatest friend of the jiva. That means his Madhurya manifestation. He is the Lord of our heart, Krishna or Chaitanya. We do not disagree if you say that an imaginary form of Bhagawan is material worship or Vyut Parashta. In other words, we're not disagreeing that an imaginary form is material. Just like the Jewish people, when Moses climbed Mount Sinai, they're worshiping this golden calf. That's imaginary. It's material. Worshipping his eternal form, which is completely spiritual, is the Dharma of the Vaishnavas. We do not accept Vyut Parashta, material worship. Because some book forbids material worship, idol worship, one cannot forbid the worship of the true deity form. Yeah, that feels better. The worship depends on the convictions in the heart of the worshiper. If his heart is beyond material contact or vyut, he can worship the pure form. You are most learned, and in your heart, sorry, must be beyond matter. But are the hearts of your followers who are not so learned beyond thinking of matter? In other words, what they're doing is, in order to win this particular argument, they're actually saying that these great mullahs are beyond matter. So they don't need to see a deity. In other words, he's praising them. You understand? You know, he's praising them. Yeah, you're beyond matter. You don't need it. You're absolutely right. But your followers, you know, they're not. As long as one thinks materially, his worship will be material. But you're not all thinking materially, so we don't worry about you. So, one may talk of the formless God, but internally, one is full of material conceptions of God. Worship of the pure form of the Lord is difficult for the public. It is for a qualified person. In other words, the public cannot worship in their hearts the pure form of God unless they actually see a particular form, that is the deity, with their eyes. He who has developed qualification of being beyond matter has overcome material conceptions. I request that you contemplate the matter internally. The mullah said, considering this, I see the way that you have indicated 6 astonishing aspects of the word Bhagawan. The same astonishing aspects are present in the word Allah. It is not necessary to argue about the meaning of the word Allah. Allah is Bhagawan. Gurchanda said, good. Then you have accepted that the Supreme Entity has beauty and wealth. You should accept that the Lord has a beautiful form in the spiritual world, which is different from the material world. That form is our deity form. The mullah said, our Quran says that the Supreme Entity has a spiritual form. That we must accept. But if one makes a likeness of that spiritual form, it becomes a material form. That is what we call vyut. If one worships that vyut, it is not worship of the supreme entity. Please give your opinion on this. Gaurachandra, so this is establishing deity worship. Gaurachandra said, in the Vaishnava scriptures, there are arrangements for worshiping the pure spiritual deity form of the Lord. The elevated devotees do not worship forms of earth or other elements. And then a verse from the Bhagavatam, famous verse. Yashatmi buddhi gunape tridatu kade swati kalatradishu moma ijadi yatirtha buddhi shalelena karhichij janeshu avigeshu saeva gokarat. One who identifies his self as the inert body composed of mucus, bile, and air, who assumes his wife and family are permanently his own. So see if any of you apply this to yourselves. Who thinks that an earthen image or the land of his birth is worshipable, or sees a place of pilgrimage as merely the water in a place to take a bath, in other words, but who never identifies himself with, feels kinship with, or worships or even visits those who are wise in spiritual truth, such a person is no better than a cow or an ass. In the words of Srimad Bhagavatam 10:84-13. In other words, if one goes to a holy place and doesn't associate with the saintly persons, then you're like a cow or an ass. Because the cows and the asses go to holy places and they drink from the water too. Gita says, Bhuteja yanti bhutani. Those who worship ghosts go to the ghosts. This material worship is unapproved worship, but there is a point of discussion here. Humans attain different qualifications according to their knowledge and previous impressions, because of sanskaras. One who understands the pure spiritual state is able to worship the spiritual form. One can understand only as much as one has progressed. He who has very low qualification cannot understand the spiritual level. When he meditates in his mind on the Lord, he imagines a form made of material qualities. In other words, he's saying, that's why we need deities, because someone who's on the material platform, they will worship a form anyway, a mental form. And that form will simply be a concoction. So it's actually helping the person to have deities, because the form he's worshiping now, and everybody's worshiping for a form, because you have to picture something about God in your mind to engage in worship. Just like in the Christian religion, they depict God as a father. And if anyone's seen this place called the Sistine Chapel, anyone seen the Sistine Chapel? Yeah. There's a picture, Michelangelo drew this picture. His God, he's a really old man. And he's reaching out to touch Adam. He has Parkinson's disease. So that's a material form, you understand? God has Parkinson's disease. He's like reaching out. It's really looks like decrepit. Worshipping that form is beneficial for taking an earthen form. He thinks that of that as the Lord's form. He meditates in his mind on a material form. Worshipping that form is beneficial for such a person. If deity worship were not present, the common jivas would have great inauspiciousness. When an ordinary jiva becomes favorable to the Lord, if he does not see the deity, the Lord, before him, he gives up hope. Becomes an impersonalist, basically. In dharmas where there is no deity worship, the person of low qualification of that dharma are very materialistic and averse to the Lord. Thus, deity worship is the basis for human dharma. Because you'll never understand God as a person unless you actually engage in deity worship. The great devotees saw the form of the Lord in pure jnana yoga, samadhi, and contemplated the pure spiritual form in their hearts, purified by bhakti. When the heart of the devotee is spread in the material world, it becomes a reflected image of that spiritual form. Thus, in other words, the devotee tells others how to make that spiritual form, or the Shastras tell others how to make that spiritual form. And therefore, that is a reflection, just to paraphrase here, of the heart of a pure devotee. The deities which we see in the temple is a reflection of the meditation that's going on in the heart of a pure devotee. Thus the Lord's spiritual form reflected by the great devotees has become the deity. For the person of high qualification, that deity form is the spiritual form of the Lord at all times. In other words, then they don't have to worship the deity, but that's there in their heart. The deity form is always in their heart. For the Madhyamadikari intermediate devotee, it is a mental form. For those on lower qualification, it is first a material form and then becomes a spiritual form when its intelligence is purified by bhava. In other words, someone who's a Kadishtadikari, his conception of the absolute is material. Even when he's looking at the deity, his understanding is not exactly a spiritual understanding, but he becomes purified by doing it. Thus, for all persons, the deity form is to be worshipped. There's no need for worship of imaginary forms, but the deities of the eternal forms of the Lord are very auspicious. Thus, amongst the Vaishnavas, there's the worship of the deity for the three types of devotees: Kanishta, Madhyama, Uttamak. There's no fault in this, since the arrangement gives more and more auspiciousness for the jivas. Yatha yatatma parimrim jate sao matpunyagata shravana vidanai tata tata pashyati vastu shukshmam chakshuryatai vanjana samprayuktam. To the degree that the Atma becomes purified by hearing and chanting my glories, a person is able to perceive my real form and qualities and experience their sweetness, just as the eye, when smeared with a special ointment, is able to see finer objects. That's 11:14:26 in the Srimad Bhagavatam. For example, when someone who has materialistic vision, someone who's not a devotee, goes to the temple and sees the deity, he's not actually seeing Krishna. Like when I invited my mother to see the deity for the first time, I thought, my mother's going to be in ecstasy. I was wrong. The first thing she said when she saw Krishna on the altar was Radha Govinda in New York. She said, "You should put your father on the altar." So she didn't see spirit because Krishna didn't reveal to her. So the jiva is covered by a material mind in this world. The jiva is not able to know himself and is not able to serve the Supreme Lord. By the process of bhakti, with hearing and chanting, the strength of the Atma increases. When the strength increases, actually wrong spelling, the bondage of matter decreases. As much as the bondage of matter decreases, the natural tendency of the Atma increases in strength. One can progress to directly serving the Lord. Some say that one should attempt to attain the real entity by rejecting the unreal. But that's not, in other words, it's what I often say, that you can't do a don't. You shouldn't simply concentrate on the negative aspects of this material world. I'm not this body, which is true. But what am I? I'm not this body, okay. It's unreal, so what? That is the practice of dry jnana, just knowledge. Where does the jiva obtain the power to reject the unreal? In other words, exactly what I was saying. You can't do a don't. You can't reject something that's unreal. You have to accept the real. Can a person imprisoned by his desire to be free become free? He should destroy the crime which has caused his bondage. The jiva's basic offense, here it is that he has forgotten that he is the eternal servant of the Lord. That also means he knew before. This counters what many people say about the origin of the jiva. If the jiva thinks of the Lord by seeing the deity, hearing the pastimes of the Lord and other methods, no matter what bondage he is in, gradually he will attain his previous natural strength. There's that. You see that outline? Yeah. Previous natural strength. So in other words, you were Krishna conscious before. And you are responsible for being here. Don't blame Krishna. The more he attains strength, the more he is competent to directly perceive the spiritual. The only method for the person of low qualification is serving the deity, hearing and chanting. The great devotees have established deity service for this purpose. That's why Prabhupada installed deities everywhere. Mullah said, is it better to meditate on the form of the mind rather than make a form out of the material elements? Gaurachandra said both are equally good. The mind is material, and whatever it thinks is material. If one says that Brahman is all-pervading, one must accept that it is all-pervading like the sky. I'm thinking of Brahman, because you can't think of Brahman. When I say this, I must refer to Brahman within time and space and material things. In other words, whenever you think of anything, it has to be within time. If the meditation of the mind is not beyond time and space, how can it conceive of something beyond time and space? In other words, because our mind, our thoughts are confined within time and space, it's impossible for us to conceive of anything outside of this realm. One may deride an imaginary form made of earth or other elements restricted by place and time. That is all material worship. There is some particular thing not present in dull matter. Taking support of that element, one can attain the spiritual entity. Bhava for the Lord is that element. In other words, you must have some emotion, bhava, and shraddha to appreciate the deity. The Atma, not matter, is endowed with this bhava. So we're endowed with this particular potential for this emotion. By chanting the Lord's name, singing his pastimes, being inspired by the deity, this bhava gradually becomes strong and becomes bhakti. The spiritual form of the Lord is revealed only by pure bhakti. It is not revealed by jnana. Jnana means speculation. Or by, in this particular context, or karma, actions. The mullah said, material objects are different from the Lord. It is said that in order to bind the jiva to matter, Satan arranged for material worship. Therefore, we say that material worship is not good. Gaurachandra said, the Lord is without a second. No one can compete with him. Everything in the world is his creation and dependent on him. Whatever you worship him with in this world will satisfy him. He will not show malice if you worship him with anything in this world. There's Yukta Vairagya right now. If there is someone called Satan, he has no power to do acts contrary to the will of the Lord. If there is a Satan, he is a special jiva dependent on the Lord. But in our reckoning, such a powerful jiva is not possible. Since no act in the world can take place which is contrary to the Lord's desire, no person is independent of the Lord. So this is something that's in Christian theology as well as a Muslim theology. Not so much in Jewish theology. I never remember a Satan. But, and I don't even know how it arose. I mean, if you read the New Testament, you don't come up with Satan, which is interesting. So where did he come from? Anyway, whatever. So Satan is supposed to be, according to Christian theology, he's supposed to be a fallen archangel. Once upon a time there was an angel, and he disobeyed God, and he was kicked out of the heavenly kingdom. And that's Satan. And he does all sorts of things. Therefore, he gives you a good excuse for being sinful. The Christians often say, the devil made me do it. Did you ever hear that saying before?
Yeah.
We also say the similar thing, Maya made me do it. So it's just an excuse. No, you did it, you rascal. Maya, you're embracing Maya. Maya didn't make you do anything. You decided to follow Maya. Satan. And you have all these stories about Satan. Like, there's interesting stories about the devil. One man wants to become rich, and Satan comes to him and says, yeah, you can become rich and famous and powerful in this world, but you have to sign a contract that after death I take you forever. And there's stories like that. And people sign a contract with the devil with blood. and they enjoy in this life, and after that they suffer. So the Christians have so many stories about Satan. You may ask, where did sin arise? So he's putting this rhetorical question before the mullah. Which rhetorical means he knows the answer, but he's putting a question that he knows the answer for. Like a teacher will sometimes say, class, how much is 1 and 1? So it's a rhetorical question, for teaching purposes. So you may ask, from where did the sin arise? We say that all jivas are servants of the Lord. This knowledge is vidya. Forgetting this knowledge is called avidya. Sin is forgetfulness of Krishna and the things that come as a consequence to the forgetfulness of Krishna. All the jivas, those jivas, who for whatever reason take shelter of avidya, ignorance, sow the seed of sin in their hearts. And we know from the analysis given in the Nectar of Devotion, there's this kuta, and the bija, and the activity, and the aparadha karma, and the parabdha karma, and all that is based on ignorance. Okay, which is the same thing as avidya, the opposite of knowledge. Those who are eternal associates of the Lord do not have this seed of sin in their hearts. Not imaginary, some astonishing thing like Satan. You must correctly understand the nature of avidya. Therefore, it is not an offense to worship the Lord in material things. It is necessary for people of low qualification. For persons of higher qualification, it produces special auspiciousness. The idea that it is not correct to worship the deity is not logical and not supported by authentic scriptures. Mullah said, when one worships the deity, bhava for the Lord does not appear. Ooh. Limitations of material qualities appear in the mind of the worshiper at all times. Gaurchand is on consulting previous histories, your conclusion is found to be wrong. Many persons of low qualification began worshiping the deity. By association with devotees, they develop elevated bhava, and realizing the spiritual nature of the deity, they became absorbed in the ocean of prema. The firm conclusion is that devotee association is the root of everything. By association with spiritual devotees of the Lord, spiritual bhava for the Lord will arise. When that spiritual bhava arises, the material conceptions of the deity disappear. Gradually becoming elevated is the result of good fortune. Generally, other religions forbid deity forms, but carefully considering how many of these followers attain spiritual bhava. Here's the point. They spend their time in arguments and violence. Oh my God, that's a pointed statement, if I ever heard one. When will they experience bhakti for the Lord? Mullah said, there's no fault if internally one worships the Lord with bhava and accepts worship of the deity. But if one worships a dog, a cat, a snake, a lusty person, etc., how can that be the worship of the Lord? Worshipable Padya Gambara Sahib particularly criticized such idol worship. And here Gaurchanda has responded. All humans show gratitude to the Lord. Even if they have committed sins, they believe in a supreme being and offer respects to all astonishing things in this world. Foolish people, inspired by gratitude to the Lord, offer respects spontaneously to the sun, to rivers, to mountains, and huge animals. They offer themselves and intimate affairs of their hearts to these things. Though bhakti and this material worship are vastly different, by expressing gratitude to the Lord and offering respects, foolish jivas gradually attain good results. If one examines in a reasonable way, one will not find fault in these people. Okay. Meditating on the formless, all-pervading Lord and bowing down to him as Muslims and others do are both devoid of pure spiritual bhava. How is this different from worshipping a cat? Phew. In other words, he's comparing worship of the impersonal manifestation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead is not different from worshiping a cat. We have concluded that it is very necessary to develop bhava for the Lord and reflect on that bhava by any means possible. If these persons of low qualification are mocked and criticized, one will block the door to the jiva's advancement completely. Those who stick dogmatically to their group show no generosity. He's really insulting them. Seeing the others do not follow their method of worship, they mock and criticize them. That is their big mistake. So, anyway, so we will take questions here. Let's see. We'll unmute people. So, who has a question here in the audience? Wait a second. Okay, who has a question? Question?
One
Yeah.
thing mentioned here is that the advanced devotee sees the Lord within the heart.
Yeah.
And they have reflected the deity. So it's a material reflection is not real. So
Yeah, but it also, yeah, materially a reflection is not real, but it represents reality. Yeah. Of course, the word reflection is used in different ways. Of course, in the 15th chapter of the Gita, the material world is considered to be a reflection of the spiritual realm. It's a perverted reflection. But when you have an actual reflection, I mean, just like you look at yourself in the mirror, yes, I mean, the left is right, the right is left, but it's not perverted. So there's two types. Use it to put your tilak on, hopefully. You put on a nice tilak. I've never learned to put on straight tilak. You have to teach me. Anyway, so, but it shows what's happening on the other side of the mirror. So certain times reflections are quite accurate. So, and for lack of a better word, the word reflection is, but we can use another word like it's a manifestation of what's happening in the pure devotion. Let's use that word instead. Bhaktivinoda Thakur. Of course, Bhaktivinoda Thakur doesn't use that word because this book was in Bengali originally. So perhaps the translator was Banu Maharaj. Should have used a different term. It's like a manifestation of what's in the pure devotion. Let's use that term instead of reflection. It's a good question. So, someone's asking a question. Hare Krishna, Gurudev. Many devotees have on their home altar murtis of Krishna, Rama, and Vishnu. How does this compare to installed deity? That's a good question. On the altars such as Gaur-Nitai. So, Krishna is present whether the deity is installed or not installed, but the whole idea of installation is something like initiation, that you're making a promise to serve the deities at that point. Because Krishna, a picture is the deity. Like if you have a picture of the Panchatattva, that's the deity. Krishna's present there. Prabhupada said even a picture of the Murti of Prabhupada, he's present there too. The spiritual master is present. So, it's a two-dimensional deity, three-dimensional deity. One day we'll have a four-dimensional deity. I don't know how you do it. But the point is, Krishna's equally there. Like if you have deities in your home, Krishna, Ram, and Vishnu, yes, they're all there and they can accept service. But when installation, you're actually vowing to serve the deities. And so Krishna reciprocates with that vow, and so you should stick with that vow. So that's why generally I'm quite hesitant to install deities in people's homes, because I know they're not going to be able to keep up with the vow. They'll go on vacation and just leave Krishna with a little bowl of nuts for 3 weeks while they go to India. So that's why I'm really not that much in favor of doing deity installations in people's homes. Because it indicates that you're actually promising to do something. I mean, that's my personal perspective. I know devotees like to have a little deity worship, a deity installation in their homes, but that's my personal perspective because they're not ready to really do the puja that's required for installed deities in the home. So anyway, that's my personal perspective. Don't quote me on it. Of course, it's on the internet now. They can quote me. So, okay, he liked my answer. Okay. Hare Krishna Maharaj, how do you understand the worship of demigod deities? Are demigods personally present? In the case of Lord Shiva, yes. Now, in the case of Indra, I have some doubts about it.
Some goddess like
What?
Goddess Lakshmi or goddess.
Yeah, I mean, there's presence. I mean, these Shaktis of the Lord and the Lord himself in his various incarnations, when you make a form, they're present in their form. But I have some doubts about just like regular demigods.
Okay.
But nobody's really, Ganesh is not a regular demigod, he's a pure devotee.
Okay.
So that's a little bit different. But I mean, like, demigods that aren't pure devotees, you can have Yamaraj on your altar.
That would be cool.
But, you know, I have some doubts about just plain old demigods. I mean, mostly they're not worshiping plain old demigods, are they? Like Indra, does anyone have Indra on his altar?
Chandra, Varuna.
What? Varuna, Vayu? Not usually.
Yeah.
So there is the presence of those personalities because they're devotees, they're pure devotees.
Mhm.
So certainly it's like having a picture of Prabhupada on the altar. Prabhupada is present. Picture of Krishna, we have we have a picture of Prabhupada there. Where else is a picture of Prabhupada? A picture of Krishna there.
Picture of you.
Picture of Prabhupada on the altar.
Picture of you.
Picture of a demon there. Picture of Rakshasa there. Oh my God. So and then of course you have the Astasakis up there, and they're present. They're present just as much as if it was a three-dimensional deity. Devotees should understand that. I mean, the first temple I joined, they had a picture of Panchatattva, and it was ecstasy. It was actually one of my favorite deities because you could see the whole Panchatattva. It was a dancing Panchatattva, not just standing like that. And it was so ecstatic to dance in front of the Panchatattva. And I didn't see a difference between the temples that had deities, you know, three-dimensional deities, and the two-dimensional deities, the Panchatattva. I felt it was, you know, ecstatic because you're reminded to dance all the time just being seeing Panchatattva. So, okay, here's something else. Hare Krishna Maharaj. Okay. Maharaj. Mahraj. So,
Here we go again.
so do we not perform Shraddha if we lose someone? Yes, we have to follow the culture. We do perform Shraddha. But in the way, read the Garuda Purana and you'll find out how to actually perform Shraddha. Because the way that most priests teach is actually not the way to perform Shraddha. Okay? If you really want to do it properly. I've been at actual performances of Shraddha, and they're done by real Brahmins, not just like ritualistic Brahmins. Here's another one. Hare Krishna, Guru Devji. See, I have so many names, it's nice. Please accept my humble obeisances, all glories to Srila Prabhupada. The aboriginals worship nature, the sun, fire, and etc. Do we perceive this as impersonalism? We perceive it as a step up to understand it's a type of impersonalism, but it's not the I wouldn't say it's so much impersonalism, because actual impersonalism is to decry the form of the Lord. It would be like what we say in the Western world, agnosticism, rather than atheism. Real impersonalism is atheism. There's no God, basically. But they're agnostic. They don't know any better, so they're worshiping something greater than themselves, and they're understand. I used to do that too. I mean, not worship, but I remember going on camping trips when I was a kid and lying out in my sleeping bag on my back and looking at the stars and everything, all the planets and everything. Like, wow, it's so great. And that wasn't exactly impersonalism, but it was not understanding the personal form of God. And I didn't do the worship, actually. but really appreciating the greatness of everything. And so it's a stepping stone. So technically speaking, it wouldn't be impersonalism, because in impersonalism, you would actually criticize the form of the Lord. You would actually say, God has no form. And I didn't say that. I simply said, God is great. And so in the same way, I think the Aboriginals generally, they just consider something that's greater than themselves, and it's a step up. It's like the universal form, something like that. So who has a question here? Any you Prabhus, Prabhis, Matashris?
Hare Krishna, Guru Maharaj.
Yeah.
Guru Maharaj, there's always sometimes a reaction because of the action. So even if we think about like someone bad about someone in our mind also,
Yeah.
is that counted as a sin as well?
No. It's Kali Yuga. We're fortunate. So you can just think badly about everybody and not, no, just joking. You don't get a reaction for what you think, you get a reaction for what you say and what you do. However, there's this thing called thinking, feeling, and willing. When you think of something, you start to feel, and then you actually do it after some time. I mean, just like even with the sense objects. Let's say I was to think of pizza or something like that. My old sin. So I was... I have to reveal my mind confession. So anyway, so if I was to start to think of pizza and continue to think about it, it would be nice to eat pizza again. It would be really nice. Why can't I eat pizza? What's wrong with it? One time, I mean, what's going to happen? You're not going to die, Maharaj. Then after a while, you're thinking, then the salivation comes. Then I say to Krishna Chandra, tell the cooks, Tilakini's expert cook, to make pizza tonight. She would do it. She would do it, and then we'd all have pizza. So instead of thinking about it, I cut it off at that point.
Hare Krishna.
Of course, I'm talking about it. But I'm not desiring it. I mean, Krishna's actually cured me. I'm cured. So anyway, so that's the point, thinking, feeling, willing. So you're not responsible. But if you think negatively about someone, and you keep thinking negatively about someone, it will come out in some words or action in regard to that person. There's no way to avoid it. I mean, just thinking, let's say, if I think, who's a rascal here? Anyway, so, no. Okay, who wants to be the victim? So anyway, I don't want to commit offense against devotees. No, not Krishna Chandra. So let's say a hypothetical person, I just think that, he's a rascal, he doesn't know anything. And I just think again and again and again. And then ultimately, he comes to me and I just make a face. And he said, "What's wrong, Maharaj?" I said, "You're stupid." It'll, not you, it'll come out. It comes out, you can't really hide what you're constantly thinking about. So that answers your question. It comes out. Okay.
The top one.
Oh, here's it. He said, yes, the salvation factor is real. I can attest. Wow.
That was a question.
Here's another question. Wow, they're active today. Hare Krishna. Some seem to distinguish deities based on things like age, location, etc. That is, deities installed by ancient acharyas such as Ramanuja, Madhva temples in India. Are deities installed in modern Hare Krishna temples world any difference in such ancient deities? No. Not really. Not really. Of course, the deity reciprocates according to the worshipper's bhakti. So let's say you have an ancient deity installed by some of these great acharyas and not being worshipped properly, you'll see them manifest differently when you go in front of them. I remember one temple I went into, wasn't an ancient temple. It was a modern Hare Krishna temple. They weren't worshiping the deities properly, and Krishna and Radharani looked like Lord Nrsimhadev. Ugra Nrsimha. I just ran out of that temple as fast as I could. So, so Krishna, you see Krishna reciprocate according to the present worship that's being done. You can have an ancient deity or a modern deity, but it actually depends on the reciprocation of the devotees. So it's not that the deities, Krishna, Balaram, are any manifesting any more or any less nectar than, let's say, really ancient deities, or not middle ancient deities like Radha Govinda or Radha Giridhari here. It depends on the devotion. I've seen this. I see that our deities that we worship in various temples, in many cases, because the deities in ISKCON temples are being worshipped on a higher standard than some of the ancient deities, they manifest more mercy. Haven't you seen that?
Yeah, yeah.
The higher standards. Sometimes there's one devotee told me a story. He went to some of the old, even Goswami temples. Oh my God! What happened?
The phone just started talking.
Crocodile.
So they went into a temple, one of the ancient temples, the traditional deities, and they touched the deities, and there was a layer of dust on top of the deities.
Krishna.
So Krishna won't manifest himself in that situation. Krishna can also leave. There was this story that I told when I was with Prabhupada, that the devotees were explaining to Prabhupada. I was in Prabhupada's room, Darshan in Sridham Mayapur, and the devotees were in Prabhupada's room. Ooh, it's getting late. And they were, wow, it's really late. So they were explaining to Prabhupada how they visited the temple. The temple hadn't treated them properly, but they went to take darshan of the deities, and Prabhupada said, there's no deity in that temple. And the devotees didn't argue with Prabhupada, but they made the point. But Prabhupada, we saw the deity. And Prabhupada said, you heard what I said. There's no deity there. So she said, oh my God, what does he mean? And then Prabhupada quoted the Bengali proverb they were using the shalagram shila to crack nuts with. So that was the point. In other words, if you use Krishna for your own aggrandizement, financial accomplishment, or whatever like that, then it's greatly sinful, and Krishna doesn't appear before you. Okay, I think we have to end now. Thank you all. Interesting class about deity worship. And, okay. All glory is to his